You notice the room go quiet too fast. Someone asked for honest input, and suddenly every face went neutral. That silence wasn't accidental. The meeting moved on like nothing happened, but you felt the shift, the unspoken agreement that certain truths weren't welcome in this room. What you're sensing has a name. It's called norm-enforced silence, and it's one of the most expensive habits in modern organizations. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to decode exactly how teams train members to stay quiet, why honest feedback gets punished invisibly, and what the pattern costs you. The first sign is subtle. The people who speak plainly slowly stop getting invited to the strategic conversations. But the deeper damage happens later, when the silence stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like the only safe option. Here's what actually happens inside most teams. Honest feedback is praised in company values and quietly penalized in actual behavior. Your manager says they want candor. The leadership deck says psychological safety. The all hands celebrates open dialogue. Then someone gives real feedback in a meeting, and within 2 weeks, their visibility drops. Their projects shift. Their name moves down the calibration list. Picture this. Tuesday stand-up. A senior engineer points out that the timeline isn't realistic. The room thanks them for the input. 3 weeks later, that engineer is no longer leading the project. Nobody connects it to the meeting, but everyone on the team learned the lesson. This is the part nobody warns you about. The punishment for honesty is almost never direct. It's atmospheric, structural, and deniable. The team doesn't need to silence you. The team teaches you to silence yourself, and that's a far more efficient system. Here's the quiet part. Silence isn't the absence of communication. Silence is a trained behavior, reinforced through hundreds of small signals. A raised eyebrow when you push back. A pause before someone responds to your concern. A redirect that buries your point under procedure. Each signal is small. Cumulatively, they reshape what you're willing to say out loud. That's how norms install themselves without anyone announcing them. What you thought was your personal hesitation is actually a learned response. Your team trained you, even if no one meant to. This is where the pattern reveals itself. Watch who speaks freely in meetings and who only speaks after checking the room. The professionals checking the room aren't weak. They've simply already learned what costs are attached to which kinds of honesty. The deeper problem is that silence norms protect the wrong people. They protect underperforming managers, fragile leaders, and political operators. When honest feedback becomes risky, the people most insulated from criticism are the ones who most need it. The system inverts itself. The high performers absorb the gap. They work around the broken process, the bad decision, the unspoken dysfunction, because raising it costs more than fixing it. Here's where it gets sharper. Eventually, those same high performers get labeled as not being team players, not because they failed, but because their silence finally cracked. Consider this scenario. A product manager flags a flaw in the launch plan. The room nods politely. The plan ships unchanged. The launch underperforms. In the post-mortem, leadership asks why nobody raised concerns earlier. The product manager stays quiet. They already learned what raising concerns costs. That post-mortem becomes theater. Everyone agrees to communicate better next time. Nothing changes because the norm was never about communication. The norm was about who was allowed to be uncomfortable. And in most teams, leadership is protected from that discomfort by design. If this sounds like your last quarter, you're not paranoid. You're paying attention to a pattern most professionals never name. Drop a comment if you've watched a team punish honesty while publicly celebrating it. I read every comment, and these patterns repeat across industries with surprising consistency. The pattern accelerates from here. Once silence becomes the norm, the team starts filtering reality before it reaches leadership. Bad news gets softened. Risks get reframed as challenges. Failures get described as learnings. The language itself becomes a coordinated avoidance system. Leadership then makes decisions based on filtered information. The decisions get worse. The team absorbs the consequences. The cycle tightens. Here's a phrase worth keeping. When a manager asks for honest input, try saying, "Can you put that in writing for me?" Watch the reaction. If the request for documentation creates discomfort, you've just confirmed that the invitation for honesty was performative. Real candor cultures don't flinch at written feedback. Performance cultures do. That single test tells you which kind of team you're actually on. What makes this worse is that the silence trains itself into your reflexes. You start editing your thoughts before they reach your mouth. You rehearse softer versions. You add disclaimers. You ask permission to disagree. You frame concerns as questions to avoid looking confrontational. Each adaptation is intelligent. Each adaptation is also a small cost paid by your professional clarity, and those costs compound. Picture this: a calibration meeting where ratings are decided. Your name comes up. Someone mentions you have great ideas but can be hard to align with. That phrase, hard to align with, is often code. It means you raised concerns the team didn't want raised. The rating reflects the discomfort, not the work. Nobody in the room sees it as punishing honesty. They see it as protecting team cohesion. The norm operates invisibly, and that's its strength. Here's another phrase that earns its weight. When pressured to agree quickly, try saying, "I want to make sure I understand. Could you clarify the goal here?" That sentence buys time. It moves the conversation from emotional pressure to logical structure. It's a quiet defensive move that rarely gets read as resistance. The professionals who survive long-term don't refuse to participate in silence norms. They learn to navigate them with surgical precision. They speak honestly in the conversations that matter, and they stay strategically quiet in the conversations that don't. The difference is calibration, not courage. This is where most professionals lose their leverage. They either speak too freely and get filtered out, or they go fully silent and disappear into the average. Neither extreme works. The third path is selective candor, and it requires reading the room more accurately than the room reads itself. Here's what to watch for next. Notice which feedback gets remembered and which feedback gets forgotten within a week. Feedback that gets remembered tends to be feedback delivered in low-stakes moments, in writing, or to specific individuals rather than groups. Feedback delivered in front of senior leadership often gets remembered for the wrong reasons. The content disappears. The discomfort lingers, and the discomfort attaches to you. Consider this. A team member raises a thoughtful concern in a leadership meeting. The concern is valid. The concern is also never referenced again. But that team member's name now carries a small invisible tag. The next time their work is evaluated, the tag shapes perception in ways nobody can quite articulate. That's how silence norms protect themselves. They don't punish the message. They mark the messenger, and the mark follows them through future decisions. The deeper layer is that these norms often masquerade as professionalism. Don't be negative. Bring solutions, not problems. Be a team player. Each phrase sounds reasonable. Each phrase, deployed selectively, becomes a tool for shutting down legitimate concern. Reasonable language can do unreasonable work. When someone tells you to bring solutions instead of problems, they're often telling you to stop naming the problem. The solution requirement is a filter, not a standard. Here's the quiet part. The most dysfunctional teams have the most sophisticated language for explaining why their dysfunction is actually maturity. That sophistication is what makes the norm so durable. You can't easily push back against language that sounds wise on the surface. Try this phrase when you sense a concern is being dismissed. I prefer to discuss this when we have more time and the right people in the room. That sentence does three things. It refuses the dismissal. It requests proper context. It implies the current setting isn't serious enough for the topic. Most managers will either escalate the conversation properly or quietly drop the topic. Either outcome is more useful than performing agreement in the moment. Here's where it gets sharper. The professionals who consistently rise in healthy organizations are the ones who can name patterns without becoming hostile to the people inside them. That separation matters. You can criticize a system without attacking individuals. The teams that conflate the two are the teams where silence norms run deepest. Picture this: a skip-level meeting where a senior leader asks how things are really going. The temptation is to be honest. The smarter move is to be specific. General honesty in a skip level often becomes ammunition for your own manager later. Specific honesty about systems and processes rarely does. The distinction is small. The career impact is enormous. One version makes you valuable, the other version makes you a problem. The hardest part of this pattern is accepting that most teams cannot be reformed by your courage alone. The norm is older than you, deeper than you, and stronger than any single conversation. That doesn't mean you stay silent. It means you choose silence and speech with intention, and you stop expecting honesty to be rewarded just because it's correct. Here is a final phrase to carry with you. Thanks for the feedback. I'll think about it. Use it when you're being pressured to react in the moment. Use it when you need space to evaluate whether honesty is strategic or self-destructive in that exact conversation. That sentence isn't avoidance. It's a refusal to be rushed into a position the room is trying to push you into. It protects your judgment. The professionals who last understand something most never learn. Honesty is a resource, not a reflex. Spend it where it earns you something. If you've watched silence gnomes quietly reshape your team, drop a comment with what you noticed first. Your observations help others recognize the pattern earlier. If this decoded something you felt for months but couldn't name, subscribe. This channel exists to make hidden workplace systems visible before they cost you. The silence in your team isn't a personality trait of the people in it. It's a trained response, reinforced by hundreds of small signals. You don't have to break the silence to escape it. You just have to stop mistaking it for agreement. The quietest rooms in your organization are rarely the most aligned. They're the most carefully managed, and management is not the same as truth. Speak when it earns you leverage. Stay quiet when it preserves it. And never confuse the room's comfort with your own clarity. Cold, clear, true. That's the only standard worth keeping.